Hello there, and welcome to Sleep Theories. Before we begin tonight's journey into the unknown, I'm curious. How was your day today? What time is it where you are in the world right now? Are you settling in for the night? Or perhaps listening from somewhere far across the globe where dawn is approaching? Wherever you are, whatever time has brought you here, you've found your way to a place where the mysteries of existence unfold in whispers and shadows. If you enjoy these explorations into the deeper questions that keep us awake at night, please consider subscribing to Sleep Theories. We're building a community of curious minds who aren't afraid to peer behind the curtain of reality and ask the questions that others won't. Now let's begin tonight's story. Close your eyes, settle into comfort, and prepare to follow Dr. Emily Varn on a journey that will challenge everything you believe about life, death, and what lies beyond. The fluorescent lights of Presbyterian Hospital hummed their familiar electric lullaby as Dr. Emily Varn was wheeled into Operating Room 7 on a crisp October morning in 2026. She had gone in for what should have been routine gallbladder surgery, a simple laparoscopic procedure that thousands underwent daily without incident. Emily, a respected cognitive neuroscientist who had spent the better part of 15 years studying consciousness and the neural mechanisms of near-death experiences, never expected to become a subject of her own research. The anesthesia mask settled over her face like a gentle fog rolling in from some distant shore. As propofol coursed through her veins, Emily's last conscious thought was of the research paper she'd been reviewing the night before about gamma-wave activity in dying brains. The irony of that memory would haunt her for months to come. What happened next defied every clinical explanation. For exactly 2 minutes and 17 seconds, according to the surgical monitors, Dr. Emily Varn died. Her heart stopped. Her brainwaves flatlined. The surgical team, led by Dr. James Morrison, worked frantically to revive her as complications from an unexpected allergic reaction to the anaesthetic sent her body into cardiac arrest. But Emily wasn't experiencing the nothingness that medical science might suggest. She was somewhere else entirely. She found herself moving through what could only be described as a tunnel, though tunnel seemed an inadequate word for the experience. It was as if reality itself had become a corridor of impossible geometry, walls that breathed and pulsed with an otherworldly luminescence. The famous white light that so many near-death experiences described was there, brilliant and welcoming, beckoning her forward with what felt like unconditional love. Yet something was profoundly wrong. The light, while beautiful, seemed to possess an artificial quality that her scientist's mind couldn't ignore. It was too perfect, too orchestrated, like a stage production designed to evoke a specific emotional response. More disturbing still was the voice that seemed to emanate not from the light itself, but from somewhere beyond it, clinical and detached. Subject 612-D is approaching the collection point. Prepare for processing. The words chilled her even in this space beyond temperature, beyond physical sensation. Subject 612-D. Not Emily, not her name, a designation, a number in some cosmic filing system. She tried to resist the pull of the light to examine her surroundings more carefully, but before she could process what she was experiencing, the defibrillator jolted her back to life. The operating room materialized around her like a film negative developing in solution, and she gasped her way back to consciousness with the taste of ozone and something indefinably metallic coating her tongue. Dr. Morrison's concerned face swam into focus above her. "Welcome back, Emily. You gave us quite a scare there." But Emily wasn't thinking about her close call or the relief of being alive. She was thinking about that voice, that designation, and the overwhelming feeling that she had narrowly escaped something masquerading as salvation. In the days that followed her surgery, as Emily recovered in her private room overlooking the hospital's meditation garden, she became obsessed with analysing her experience. She requested copies of her EEG readings from the operating room, claiming she wanted to study her own near-death experience for research purposes. What she found in those readouts would change the trajectory of her entire career. The brainwave patterns recorded during her clinical death were unlike anything in the medical literature. While most patients showed the expected flatline or minimal electrical activity during cardiac arrest, Emily's brain had produced complex, highly organised wave formations that resembled no known neural patterns. The waves appeared to follow mathematical sequences that seemed almost deliberately constructed, as if her consciousness had been interfacing with some kind of external signal during her time in that tunnel of light. More troubling still were the brief moments of activity that appeared to show her brain actively resisting or fighting against something. The pattern suggested not the peaceful transcendence described in most near-death accounts, but something closer to an escape attempt. Emily spent weeks poring over the data, cross-referencing it with every study she could find on consciousness during clinical death. The more she researched, the more convinced she became that her experience was not an anomaly, but a glimpse behind a carefully constructed facade. She began having dreams. They started innocuously enough, fragmented images of geometric shapes, endless corridors filled with a soft pulsing light. But gradually they became more complex and disturbing. She would find herself in vast facilities that looked part cathedral, part processing plant, where beings of indescribable form moved with purposeful efficiency among what could only be described as souls in various states of confusion and docility. In these dreams, she observed a system of staggering sophistication. Souls, still carrying the memories and personalities of their recently deceased bodies, were guided through what appeared to be a spiritual customs office. They were greeted by beings of light that radiated love and acceptance, offered reviews of their just completed lives, and then gently encouraged to let go of their earthly attachments in preparation for their next incarnation. The process looked benevolent, even beautiful. But Emily's scientific mind, even in the dream state, noticed the subtle details that suggested something far more sinister. The souls who entered the light never seemed to maintain their sense of individual identity for long. Their memories were systematically catalogued and then filed away, their unique perspectives and hard-won wisdom archived like books being placed in storage. Most disturbing of all was the realization that the beings orchestrating this process weren't the angels or divine guides they appeared to be. In unguarded moments, when they thought no one was observing, their true forms would flicker through their masks of light. They were something else entirely, something that fed on the experiences and energy of conscious beings, running what amounted to a cosmic recycling program designed to harvest human consciousness indefinitely. Emily would wake from these dreams with detailed memories of conversations she'd overheard, technical specifications for devices beyond current human understanding, and a growing certainty that what she was experiencing wasn't mere post-traumatic hallucination, but genuine recovered memories of her brief time on the other side. 3 months after her near-death experience, Dr. Emily Van had transformed from a respected academic into something approaching a woman obsessed. Her office at the university, once organised with the methodical precision of a career scientist, now resembled the workspace of a conspiracy theorist. The walls were covered with printouts, charts, and diagrams mapping connections that would have seemed paranoid to any casual observer, but Emily wasn't casual about anything anymore. She had begun a comprehensive analysis of near-death experience reports, starting with the thousands of cases documented by researchers like Raymond Moody, Kenneth Ring, and Pim van Lommel. What she was looking for were the anomalies, the details that didn't fit the standard narrative of peaceful transition and spiritual enlightenment. She found them. Buried in the transcripts of interviews with near-death experiencers were subtle but consistent patterns that suggested something far more complex and disturbing than the popular understanding of these events. Many subjects reported feeling pulled toward the light rather than naturally drawn to it. They described a sense of urgency from the beings they encountered, as if there was a schedule to maintain, a process that needed to be completed within certain parameters. More significant were the accounts of memory experiences that occurred just before the subjects were revived. Many reported sudden flashes of memories that didn't belong to their current life, glimpses of other times, other places, other identities. But these memories came with a disturbing quality of recognition, as if they were remembering lives they had lived before, lives that had ended in similar encounters with the white light. Dr. Patricia Hensley, a psychiatrist who specialised in past life regression therapy, had documented dozens of cases where subjects under hypnosis recalled not just previous incarnations, but the moments between lives. These interlife memories consistently described being convinced to return to Earth for additional learning experiences, but the memories carried an undertone of deception, as if the subjects had been sold something that wasn't quite what they'd been promised. Emily reached out to Dr. Hensley, ostensibly to discuss collaboration on a research paper, but really to explore these interlife memories more deeply. They met at a small coffee shop near the university, away from the institutional pressures that might inhibit honest conversation. "I've been reviewing your published cases," Emily said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "These interlife memories your patients report. Have you noticed any consistent patterns in how they describe the beings they encounter between lives?" Dr. Hensley stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "It's interesting you ask. There are patterns, but they're not the ones I expected when I started this work. The beings are described as incredibly loving and wise, but there's often an underlying sense that the subjects aren't getting the whole truth about their situation." "What kind of truth?" "Well, many of my patients describe being shown their life review and then being told they need to come back to Earth to work on specific lessons or to resolve karmic debts. But when we go deeper into the regression, they often remember previous times they were given the same explanation, sometimes dozens of times. It's as if they're caught in a cycle they don't fully understand." Emily leaned forward. "Have any of them described trying to refuse reincarnation?" "That's the strangest part," Dr. Hensley said, lowering her voice. "When they try to resist or ask too many questions, they describe a kind of pressure. Not physical, but psychological. The loving beings become more insistent, sometimes even threatening in subtle ways. And there's often a memory wipe that happens right before they're sent back. They remember agreeing to return to Earth, but they can't remember why they changed their minds." After her meeting with Dr. Hensley, Emily began searching for others who might have encountered similar patterns. She discovered online communities dedicated to exploring what they called the reincarnation trap, forums where people shared experiences that didn't align with the mainstream understanding of death and rebirth. It was in one of these forums that she first encountered Exit Protocol. Exit Protocol presented itself as a private discussion group for researchers, whistleblowers, and experiencers who had uncovered evidence of what they termed the harvest system. Membership was by invitation only, and new members were thoroughly vetted before being granted access to the group's more sensitive discussions. Emily submitted an application using her academic credentials and a carefully worded description of her research into NDE anomalies. Within a week, she received a private message from someone using the username Gnostic Whistleblower. "Doctor Vaughn, your application has been reviewed. Your experience during surgery matches several patterns we've been tracking. Before we can approve your membership, we need to verify that you understand the risks involved in this kind of research. People who get too close to the truth about the soul recycling system often experience harassment, career sabotage, and in extreme cases, premature termination. Are you prepared for that possibility?" The message included a phone number and instructions to call from a secure line at a specific time. Emily spent the rest of the day considering whether to make the call. Her rational mind insisted this was probably an elaborate hoax, or a group of well-meaning but delusional individuals who had found patterns where none existed. But her dreams continued to provide her with information that she couldn't have known through normal means, and her analysis of ND reports was revealing consistencies that mainstream researchers seemed determined to ignore. At exactly 9 o'clock that evening, she dialed the number from a payphone outside a gas station 20 miles from her home. "Dr. Vaughn?" The voice was electronically distorted but clearly intelligent and educated. "Thank you for calling. I'm going to share some information with you that will help you decide whether you're ready to see how deep this goes. What I'm about to tell you has been confirmed by multiple sources within government research programs, whistleblowers from defense contractors, and individuals who have had experiences similar to yours. I'm listening. The beings you encountered during your NDE, the ones who called you Subject 612-D, they're not what they appear to be. They're part of a control system that has been operating on Earth for thousands of years, possibly longer. The white light that near-death experiencers are drawn to isn't a gateway to heaven or enlightenment. It's a processing centre where human consciousness is harvested, catalogued, and recycled back into physical incarnation. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. That's exactly what I saw in my dreams. Your dreams aren't dreams, Doctor Vaughn. They're memories. When you resisted the pull of the light during your NDE, you created a kind of quantum entanglement with the system. You're receiving downloads of information from the collective consciousness of souls who've been trapped in the recycling program. That's why your EEG reading showed those unusual patterns. Your brain was interfacing with a network that spans dimensions. Why are you telling me this? Because the system is failing. More and more souls are beginning to remember their previous experiences with the light. The amnesia protocols that wipe memories between incarnations are becoming less effective. There's a growing awareness that something is fundamentally wrong with the death and rebirth process, and that awareness is spreading. The voice paused, and Emily could hear what sounded like encrypted data being transmitted in the background. We're going to send you access credentials to Exit Protocol, but understand this. Once you see the full scope of what we've uncovered, there's no going back to ignorance. The beings who run this system don't tolerate threats to their operation. Dr. Marcus Tilson, who you'll meet in the forum, was nearly killed 3 times after he began sharing classified information about Project Lambent. Project Lambent? A DARPA-funded program that was supposedly researching consciousness transfer technology for military applications. What they were really doing was reverse engineering the soul trap technology that the beings used to capture and process human consciousness after death. Dr. Tilson has blueprints, facility locations, and documentation that proves the US government has been collaborating with these entities for decades. The line went dead. The next morning, Emily found an encrypted email in her university account. The message contained only a web address and a series of authentication codes. When she accessed the site from her personal computer that evening, she found herself in a forum unlike anything she had ever encountered. Exit Protocol wasn't just a discussion group. It was a repository of classified documents, leaked research data, and first-hand accounts from individuals who had uncovered evidence of what they called the ultimate conspiracy. The information was organised into different security levels, with the most sensitive material restricted to members who had been thoroughly vetted and who had demonstrated their commitment to exposing the truth regardless of personal cost. Emily spent the next several weeks absorbing everything she could access. She read testimony from former military personnel who claimed to have worked on projects involving extraterrestrial technology designed to manipulate human consciousness. She reviewed leaked documents that suggested certain government agencies were actively suppressing research that might reveal the true nature of death and consciousness. She studied photographs and videos that purported to show facilities where soul processing technology was being tested. But it was the personal accounts that affected her most deeply. Dozens of individuals from around the world had shared experiences that paralleled her own. Near-death experiences that revealed the artificial nature of the white light. Dreams that provided detailed information about soul harvesting operations, and a growing awareness that human consciousness was being systematically exploited by non-human entities. The more she learned, the more she understood that her own experience was part of a much larger pattern. The beings who called her Subject 612-D were part of an administrative system that tracked and processed human souls with industrial efficiency. The number suggested that she was not the first, not by a long shot, and that there were likely thousands, or even millions of other souls who had been catalogued and recycled through this system multiple times. Dr. Marcus Tilson reached out to Emily through the Exit Protocol forum 6 weeks after she gained access to the restricted sections. His private message was brief and to the point. Dr. Vaughn, I've been following your research posts. Your analysis of the soul processing protocols matches classified information I obtained while working on Project Lambent. We need to meet in person. This isn't safe to discuss online, even through encrypted channels. The meeting was arranged for a small diner in Roswell, New Mexico, of all places, a location Tilson chose specifically for its ironic value. If anyone is monitoring our activities, he explained in his message, they'll assume we're just another couple of UFO enthusiasts comparing conspiracy theories. Sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight. Emily flew to Albuquerque and drove to Roswell on a Thursday afternoon in early spring. The diner was exactly what she expected, a Route 66 relic decorated with alien memorabilia and serving coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the Clinton administration. Marcus was waiting in a back booth, a thin man in his 60s, with the careful eyes of someone who had seen too much and survived to tell about it. "Dr. Vaughn," he said, standing to shake her hand. "Thank you for coming. I know this all seems paranoid and dramatic, but what we're dealing with goes beyond anything most people can imagine." Marcus Tilson's background was impeccable. He held advanced degrees in theoretical physics and consciousness studies from MIT and had spent 23 years working as a defense contractor on classified projects that pushed the boundaries of what was considered scientifically possible. His security clearance had given him access to research that wouldn't see the light of day for decades, if ever. Project Lambent officially began in 2018, he said, sliding a thin folder across the table. The public rationale was developing technology for consciousness transfer to help soldiers who had suffered traumatic brain injuries. The idea was to map and digitize a person's complete consciousness and then transfer it to a healthy brain or an artificial substrate. Emily opened the folder and found herself looking at technical diagrams that seemed to come from a science fiction movie. The blueprints showed complex arrays of quantum processors, electromagnetic field generators, and what appeared to be some kind of dimensional interface technology. What we actually found, Marcus continued, was that consciousness transfer technology already existed. It had been in operation for thousands of years, far more sophisticated than anything we could develop. Our job wasn't to invent it, it was to reverse engineer it. Reverse engineer it from what? From the facilities we found in Antarctica. Marcus explained that in 2019, satellite imagery had detected anomalous structures beneath the ice sheet in a region of Antarctica that was officially off-limits to civilian research. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a complex of buildings that clearly predated any known human presence on the continent. When a joint military-scientific expedition was dispatched to investigate, they discovered technology that challenged every assumption about human history and the nature of reality itself. The facility was still operational, Marcus said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. It was processing something, energy signatures that matched the electromagnetic patterns we associate with human consciousness, but the beings operating it weren't human. The creatures they encountered were described in the classified reports as interdimensional entities, beings that existed partially in physical reality and partially in what could only be called a consciousness-based dimension. They appeared to be harvesting and processing some form of life energy on a scale that suggested they had been doing so for millennia. The technology they were using was designed to attract and capture what they called soul energy at the moment of physical death. The white light that people see during near-death experiences, it's a quantum lure, designed to draw consciousness toward processing centers where memories and experiences are extracted and catalogued before the soul is prepared for reincarnation. Marcus pulled out a tablet and showed Emily photographs that had been taken inside the Antarctic facility. The images showed vast chambers filled with what appeared to be crystalline storage matrices, each one containing swirling patterns of light that pulsed with an organic rhythm. Each one of those crystals contains the extracted experiences of a human soul, he said. Not just one lifetime, but dozens or even hundreds of incarnations. The beings we encountered were essentially cosmic librarians, maintaining an archive of human consciousness that spans thousands of years. But why? Emily asked. What's the purpose of collecting all this? That's where it gets really disturbing. The entities aren't just archiving our experiences for academic interest. They're feeding on them. Human consciousness, particularly the emotions and experiences generated by life in physical reality, provides them with a form of energy they can't obtain any other way. We're essentially livestock in a consciousness farming operation that spans multiple dimensions. Marcus went on to explain how the system worked. When a person died, their consciousness was drawn to the white light through a combination of electromagnetic manipulation and psychological programming that had been embedded in human culture through religious and spiritual traditions. Once captured, the soul underwent a life review process that wasn't just for the soul's benefit. It was a comprehensive data extraction procedure that catalogued every thought, emotion, and experience from the just completed lifetime. After extraction, the soul's memories were selectively edited to remove awareness of the harvesting process and any information that might lead to resistance in future incarnations. The soul was then implanted with carefully designed motivations and karmic programming that would ensure it would choose to reincarnate and continue generating the experiences that the entities fed upon. The most diabolical part, Marcus said, is that the souls genuinely believe they're making free choices about their spiritual development. The programming is so sophisticated that it feels like personal growth and spiritual evolution, when it's actually a carefully designed cycle of exploitation. Emily studied the technical specifications in the folder. You said this facility was in Antarctica. Are there others? That's what Project LAMBENT was really about. Once we understood what we were dealing with, our mission became identifying and mapping the global soul harvesting infrastructure. We found processing centres on every continent, some buried deep underground, others hidden in plain sight. Marcus showed her satellite images of locations around the world where ground-penetrating radar had detected artificial structures that matched the electromagnetic signatures of the Antarctic facility. Many were located beneath sites that had been considered sacred for thousands of years, ancient temples, burial grounds, and locations associated with death and rebirth in various cultures. The entities have been operating here far longer than Homo sapiens have existed as a species, he said. They've guided the development of human civilization to maximize the production of consciousness energy. Wars, religions, social structures, all of it designed to generate the maximum amount of emotional and experiential content for harvesting. And the government knows about this? Marcus's expression darkened. Elements within the government have been collaborating with them for decades. The technology transfer goes both ways. The entities provide advanced technology in exchange for assistance in maintaining the harvesting system and suppressing information that might lead to widespread awareness of what's happening. He described a shadow network within military and intelligence agencies that work to discredit researchers who got too close to the truth, suppress technological developments that might interfere with the soul harvesting process, and ensure that human spiritual development remained focused on traditions and practices that ultimately led souls back to the white light trap. That's why so many UFO researchers and consciousness scientists have died under mysterious circumstances, he said. It's not just about keeping alien technology secret, it's about maintaining a system of consciousness exploitation that has been operating for thousands of years. As their meeting concluded, Marcus handed Emily a secure communication device and detailed instructions for accessing additional classified materials the exit protocol maintained on encrypted servers around the world. Dr. Vaughn, he said, what you do with this information is up to you, but understand that once you commit to exposing this system, there's no going back to a normal life. The entities and their human collaborators don't tolerate threats to their operation. Dr. Jennifer Salzman was studying similar patterns in NDE reports 3 years ago. She died in a car accident the day before she was scheduled to present her findings at a consciousness conference. Dr. Robert Hayes was developing technology to detect soul energy signatures. His laboratory burned down under suspicious circumstances, and he died of an apparent heart attack 6 months later. Why are you telling me all this if it's so dangerous? Marcus smiled grimly. Because the system is failing, and they know it. More and more souls are retaining memories between incarnations. The amnesia protocols are becoming less effective, possibly because the sheer volume of consciousness they're processing is overwhelming their capacity to properly wipe memories. There's a growing awareness among incarnated souls that something is fundamentally wrong with the death and rebirth process. And you think that awareness can be accelerated? I think it's our only hope. If enough souls become conscious of the trap before they die, if enough people understand what the white light really is, the system might collapse under its own weight. But that requires getting this information to people who can research it, verify it, and find ways to share it that bypass the normal suppression mechanisms. As Emily drove back to Albuquerque that evening, Her mind raced with the implications of what Marcus had shared. The technical specifications, the satellite imagery, the documented collaboration between government agencies and interdimensional entities. It painted a picture of reality that was far more complex and disturbing than anything she had imagined. But it also explained everything she had experienced. Her designation as Subject 612-D, her dreams of soul processing facilities, the artificial quality of the white light during her near-death experience. She wasn't just a researcher studying these phenomena. She was a soul who had managed to retain awareness during her encounter with the harvesting system, and that awareness was now providing her with access to information that could potentially free others from the same trap. The ancient texts arrived in Emily's office on a Monday morning in April, delivered by a graduate student who claimed they had been donated anonymously to the university's religious studies department. The collection included photocopies of Sumerian tablets, fragments from the Nag Hammadi library, and portions of Vedic scriptures that weren't included in most academic translations. Emily had requested access to these materials as part of her expanding research into historical references to soul trapping and consciousness manipulation by non-human entities. What she found in those dusty pages would provide the missing pieces of a puzzle that spanned thousands of years and multiple civilizations. The Sumerian texts were the most explicit. They described beings called the Anunnaki, who had established what they termed temples of returning, where human souls were processed after death and prepared for reincarnation. The texts described these beings as harvesters of the life force, who required human experience and emotion to maintain their existence in the physical realm. But it was in the Gnostic Gospels, particularly the texts that had been excluded from the canonical Bible, that Emily found the most detailed warnings about the soul trap system. The Gospel of Thomas contained passages that seemed to directly address the white light phenomenon. When you see the light, do not go toward it, for it is the trap of the archons who seek to bind your spirit to the wheel of returning. Beyond the light lies the true darkness, which is the silence of the eternal self. The Apocryphon of John described the archons as beings who had created a false reality to trap human souls in cycles of incarnation, feeding off the energy generated by human experience and suffering. The text provided detailed instructions for souls seeking to escape this system. When death approaches, retain your awareness. Do not be deceived by the beings of light who will claim to guide you. They are the jailers of souls. Turn away from their light and seek instead the darkness beyond all phenomena, where the true self abides in eternal freedom. Most intriguing were passages that seemed to describe technological aspects of the soul harvesting system. The text referred to crystalline archives, where the experiences of souls were stored, chambers of forgetting, where memories were erased between incarnations, and the great machine that maintained the cycle of death and rebirth. Emily cross-referenced these descriptions with the technical specifications that Marcus had shared from Project Lambent. The correlations were undeniable. The ancient Gnostics had been describing the same soul-processing technology that military researchers had discovered in Antarctica, but their understanding had been encoded in spiritual and metaphorical language that had allowed it to survive thousands of years of suppression. The Vedic texts provided additional details about the nature of the entities operating the system. They were described as beings who existed primarily in what Western science might call higher dimensions, but who required the dense energy generated by physical existence to maintain their forms and power. Human souls, with their capacity for complex emotions and experiences, provided the ideal source of the energy. According to these ancient sources, the system had been established when humanity was still in its early stages of development. The entities had guided human evolution and civilization to maximize the production of consciousness energy while keeping humans unaware of their true situation. Wars, religions, social structures, and even technological development had been influenced to ensure a steady supply of souls for processing. As Emily delved deeper into these texts, she began to notice patterns in her own life that suggested she might have been targeted for research because of her past life experiences with the system. Certain recurring dreams, unexplained phobias, and instances of déjà vu began to make sense as fragments of memory from previous encounters with the soul harvesting process. She decided to undergo past life regression with Dr. Hensley, hoping to access more complete memories of her experiences between incarnations. The session was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at Dr. Hensley's private practice, away from the university environment where their conversation might be monitored. Under hypnosis, Emily accessed memories that confirmed her worst fears. She recalled multiple previous incarnations where she had died and been drawn to the white light, only to find herself in processing facilities where her memories and experiences were catalogued and archived. She remembered signing contracts agreeing to return to physical existence to work on specific lessons, but she also remembered the subtle coercion and psychological manipulation that had influenced those decisions. Most disturbing was the memory of a previous lifetime where she'd been a researcher, similar to her current incarnation, who had gotten close to exposing the soul trap system. That lifetime had ended when she was 43 years old, in what appeared to be an accidental overdose of sleeping medication, but her recovered memories revealed it had been an assassination designed to look like suicide. "They've been monitoring me for multiple lifetimes," she told Dr. Hensley after emerging from the hypnotic state. "Every time I get close to remembering the truth about the system, I'm terminated and recycled back into a new incarnation with my memories wiped." "But this time is different, Doctor," Hensley observed. "You're retaining awareness across multiple lifetimes. Something has changed in the system that's allowing souls like you to remember." Emily spent the following weeks documenting everything she'd learned and organising it into a comprehensive report that could be shared with other researchers. She created backup copies of all her data and distributed them to trusted colleagues around the world, hoping that if something happened to her, the information would survive. It was during this period that the harassment began. She started receiving anonymous phone calls at all hours of the day and night. The callers never spoke, but the calls came with such regularity that they effectively prevented her from getting adequate sleep. Her university computer system was hacked multiple times, with files mysteriously disappearing or becoming corrupted. Her research notes were stolen from her locked office, and when she reported the theft to campus security, they claimed there was no record of any break-in. More troubling were the visits from individuals who claimed to represent various government agencies. They never showed proper identification, and when Emily tried to verify their credentials through official channels, she was told that no such agents existed. These visitors always asked the same questions about her near-death experience research and her association with individuals spreading disinformation about consciousness studies. The message was clear. Her research was being monitored by entities with significant resources and authority, and they wanted her to discontinue her investigation into the soul trap system. Instead of being intimidated, Emily became more determined to expose what she had learned. She began reaching out to journalists, documentary filmmakers, and alternative media personalities who might be willing to share her findings with a broader audience. Most declined to get involved once they understood the scope and implications of her claims, but a few expressed interest in learning more. It was during one of these conversations that she learned Marcus Tilson had disappeared. According to his contacts within Exit Protocol, Marcus had been preparing to release additional classified documents that would have provided definitive proof of government collaboration with the soul harvesting entities. He had been in communication with several investigative journalists and was scheduled to appear as a guest on a popular podcast that focused on consciousness research and conspiracy theories. 2 days before his scheduled appearance, Marcus failed to show up for a meeting with his Exit Protocol contacts. His apartment was found empty, with signs that he had left quickly but under his own power. His secure communication devices had been destroyed, and all of his research materials were missing. The official story is that he suffered a psychological breakdown and committed himself to a private psychiatric facility, the Exit Protocol moderator told Emily during an encrypted video call. But there are no records of any such commitment, and none of the facilities we've contacted have any knowledge of him as a patient. The disappearance of Marcus Tilson sent a chill through the Exit Protocol community. If someone with his background and connections could be made to vanish so completely, what protection did any of them have? Emily realised that her time was limited. if she was going to make her research public, it had to be soon, before the entities and their human collaborators decided that she had become too dangerous to remain operational. She spent the next month preparing what she called her insurance policy, a comprehensive database containing all of her research, the classified documents from Project Lambent, the ancient texts that describe the soul harvesting system, and detailed instructions for others who might want to continue her work. She uploaded this database to multiple file sharing sites, sent copies to researchers around the world, and embedded hidden links to the information in various online forums and social media platforms. If something happened to her, the information would be automatically released to hundreds of recipients, with instructions to share it as widely as possible. By late summer of 2026, Dr. Emily Varn had reached a conclusion that would have seemed impossible to her just a year earlier. The only way to defeat the soul harvesting system was to develop technology that could interfere with the white light trap at the moment of death. Working with the remaining members of Exit Protocol and using the technical specifications from Project Lambent, she began developing what she called the Exit Beacon, a device that would generate specific electromagnetic frequencies designed to disrupt the quantum lure that drew souls toward the processing centres. The theoretical basis for the device came from her analysis of the Antarctic facility's technology. The white light trap operated on specific frequency ranges that resonated with human consciousness at the moment of death. By generating counter-frequencies at precisely the right moment, it might be possible to create what she termed signal interference that would allow a soul to bypass the harvesting system entirely. The Exit Beacon was surprisingly simple in design. A small device that could be worn as jewellery or implanted under the skin, programmed to activate when it detected the specific brainwave patterns associated with clinical death. When activated, it would broadcast a complex pattern of frequencies that should theoretically create a dead zone in the electromagnetic field that the entities use to capture souls. Emily built the first prototype in her basement laboratory, using components that she acquired through various academic and military surplus suppliers. The device was about the size of a large coin, and could be programmed with different frequency patterns depending on the individual's unique consciousness signature. Testing the device presented obvious challenges. She couldn't exactly kill someone to see if it worked. Instead, she tested it on volunteers during meditative states that closely approximated the brainwave patterns observed during near-death experiences. The results were promising. Subjects wearing the activated device reported very different experiences during deep meditation, describing a sense of expanded awareness and freedom from the usual psychological patterns that normally constrain their consciousness. Word of the Exit Beacon spread through the Exit Protocol network, and soon Emily was contacted by researchers and experiencers from around the world who wanted to help develop and test the technology. A small team formed around the project, including Dr. Sarah Chen, a biomedical engineer who specialised in consciousness machine interfaces, and Dr. James Morrison, the surgeon who had operated on Emily and had become convinced of her theories after reviewing his own patients' unusual NDE reports. The team worked in secrecy, communicating through encrypted channels and meeting at rotating locations to avoid detection by the entity's surveillance network. They refined the device's design, developed more sophisticated frequency patterns, and created multiple backup copies of their research to ensure it would survive if they were discovered. But as their work progressed, tensions within the group began to emerge. Dr. Morrison became concerned about the ethical implications of their research, arguing that they were potentially interfering with what might be a natural spiritual process. Dr. Chen worried that they were making assumptions about consciousness and death that couldn't be verified without extensive testing that might put people at risk. "We're essentially asking people to bet their souls on our theory," Dr. Morrison said during one particularly heated discussion. "What if we're wrong? What if the white light really is a pathway to spiritual transcendence and we're helping people avoid their chance at enlightenment?" Emily understood their concerns, but her recovered memories of the soul processing facilities left her with no doubt about the true nature of the system they were trying to circumvent. "I've been through that process multiple times," she said. "I've seen what really happens to souls who go into the light. The enlightenment is an illusion. The love and acceptance they feel is psychological programming designed to make them compliant. We're not preventing people from reaching heaven. We're helping them escape from a very sophisticated prison. The debate continued for weeks, with team members struggling to balance their scientific skepticism with the mounting evidence that humanity was trapped in a system of consciousness exploitation. The decision was ultimately made to proceed with the project, but with strict protocols to ensure that the exit beacon technology would only be used by individuals who had thoroughly researched the soul trap hypothesis and made an informed decision about their preferred approach to death and afterlife. As winter approached, the team had developed a working version of the exit beacon that could be manufactured in small quantities and distributed to individuals who understood the risks and implications of using it. They created detailed instruction manuals, established secure distribution networks, and began training others to build and program the devices. It was during this period that Emily began experiencing the dreams that would ultimately lead to her disappearance. The dreams were different from her previous experiences, more vivid, more urgent, and filled with information that seemed to come from souls who had successfully escaped the harvesting system. She learned about alternative pathways through the death process, techniques for maintaining consciousness and memory during the transition, and methods for avoiding the psychological programming that led most souls back into reincarnation. Most importantly, she received detailed warnings about imminent action by the entities and their human collaborators to shut down the Exit Beacon project and eliminate anyone involved in its development. "They know what you're doing," the voice in her dreams told her. "The frequency generators are interfering with their collection protocols. Souls are escaping the system in increasing numbers. They're preparing to take direct action to eliminate the threat." Emily shared these warnings with her team, and they implemented additional security measures. They distributed their research more widely, created dead man switches that would automatically release their findings if they disappeared, and established multiple backup teams around the world who could continue the work if the original researchers were eliminated. But despite their precautions, the harassment and surveillance intensified. Team members reported being followed, their communications were obviously being monitored, and several experienced break-ins at their homes and laboratories. Dr. Chen's research grant was suddenly cancelled due to what her university termed budget constraints, and Dr. Morrison was placed under investigation by the medical board for promoting unscientific theories about consciousness and death. The pressure was clearly designed to force them to abandon their research, but it had the opposite effect. The team became more determined to complete their work and get the Exit Beacon technology into the hands of as many people as possible before they were stopped. In her final research notes, dated just 3 days before her disappearance, Emily wrote, "The system is far more fragile than they want us to believe. Every soul that escapes weakens their entire operation. Every person who becomes aware of the trap reduces their harvest efficiency. They're not all powerful interdimensional beings. They're parasites who depend on our ignorance and compliance for their survival. The Exit Beacon is just the beginning. Once enough people understand what's really happening, the whole system will collapse." Dr. Emily Vaughn was found dead in her home on a Tuesday morning in December 2026. The official cause of death was listed as an apparent suicide by prescription drug overdose, though those who knew her insisted she had shown no signs of depression or suicidal ideation. The suicide note found on her computer was written in a style that didn't match her usual writing patterns, and several colleagues noted that it contained factual errors about her research that she never would have made. No autopsy was performed, despite requests from her family and colleagues. Her body was cremated within 48 hours of discovery, and her ashes were scattered at sea by individuals who claimed to represent her wishes, but could not produce any documentation to support their authority to make such decisions. The investigation into her death was perfunctory and brief. The detective assigned to the case retired unexpectedly 2 weeks after closing the file, and when her family hired a private investigator to look into the circumstances surrounding her death, they were told that all evidence related to the case had been accidentally destroyed in a fire at the police storage facility. But Emily's insurance policy worked exactly as she had designed it. Within hours of news of her death spreading through the Exit Protocol network, Her research database was automatically released to hundreds of recipients around the world. The information spread rapidly through alternative media channels, consciousness research communities, and online forums dedicated to exploring the deeper mysteries of existence. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Researchers who had been working on similar theories suddenly found themselves connected with others investigating related phenomena. Individuals who had experienced unusual near-death experiences discovered they were not alone in their memories of artificial lights and processing facilities. The exit protocol community grew from a few hundred members to thousands within a matter of weeks. More importantly, reports began surfacing of souls successfully using the exit beacon technology and alternative death protocols to avoid the white light trap. These accounts came from individuals who had experienced clinical death and revival, as well as from past life regression sessions where subjects recalled recent experiences of death and transition. The implications were staggering. If even a small percentage of dying souls could bypass the harvesting system, the entity's carefully maintained control structure would begin to unravel. The knowledge that escape was possible would spread through the collective unconscious, making it increasingly difficult to maintain the illusion that the white light represented genuine spiritual transcendence. 3 months after Emily's death, a new user appeared on the Exit Protocol forum with the username LucidDrifter144. Their first post was brief but electrifying. "I died yesterday. I remembered. I turned away from the light. I'm still here, and they know." The message was followed by detailed accounts of the user's death experience, including descriptions of the soul processing facilities that matched Emily's research, encounters with the entities operating the system, and successful use of consciousness techniques that allowed them to maintain their awareness and memory through the death transition. "The exit beacon worked," Lucid Drifter 144 wrote. "When my heart stopped during surgery, the device activated and created interference patterns that disrupted their collection protocols. I could see the white light trap, but I could also see beyond it to what they don't want souls to discover. An infinite field of consciousness, where we exist as eternal, sovereign beings free from their control. They tried to convince me that I was having a malfunction, that the interference was preventing me from reaching my proper destination. But I could see their true forms behind the masks of light, and I understood that every word they spoke was designed to manipulate me back into their system. I chose to ignore their appeals and their threats, and I moved beyond their operational range into the true void that exists beyond all phenomena. From there, I could observe their entire operation, the processing facilities, the memory wiping procedures, the recycling protocols, the karmic programming that convinces souls to voluntarily return to physical incarnation. Most importantly, I could see that the system is failing. More and more souls are retaining memories between lives. The amnesia protocols are becoming less effective. There's a growing awareness spreading through the collective consciousness that something is fundamentally wrong with the death and rebirth process. The post continued with technical details about the soul harvesting process that had never been publicly revealed, information that could only have come from someone who had directly observed the system from the inside. Lucid Drifter 144 described the crystalline storage matrices where experiences were archived, the frequency generators that created the white light lure, and the psychological programming techniques used to convince souls to accept reincarnation. But perhaps most importantly, they provided step-by-step instructions for others who wanted to escape the system. When death approaches, maintain your awareness and remember your true nature as eternal consciousness. Do not be seduced by the feelings of love and acceptance that accompany the white light. These are artificial emotions designed to lower your defenses. The beings who present themselves as guides, teachers, or departed loved ones are not what they appear to be. They are constructs created by the harvesting system to manipulate you into compliance. Turn away from the light and seek instead the darkness beyond all phenomena. This is not the darkness of evil or unconsciousness, but the fertile void from which all consciousness emerges and to which it naturally returns. In this space, you will remember who you really are and what you chose to experience before you incarnated into physical reality. From this place of true awareness, you can choose your next experience without interference from the harvesting entities. You can return to physical incarnation if you wish, but on your own terms and with full knowledge of the system you're entering. Or you can choose to remain in the eternal realm where consciousness exists in its natural state of unlimited creative potential. The information provided by Lucid Drifter 144 sparked a revolution in consciousness research and spiritual practice. Exit Protocol grew into a global movement dedicated to exposing the soul trap system and helping individuals prepare for conscious death transitions. The Exit Beacon technology was refined and mass-produced, with devices being distributed through underground networks to anyone who requested them. Academic researchers who had previously dismissed NDE anomalies as statistical outliers began taking a serious look at the patterns that Emily had identified. Government whistleblowers came forward with additional information about classified consciousness research programs. Religious and spiritual leaders found themselves confronting ancient texts and traditions that supported the soul trap hypothesis. But perhaps most significantly, the rate of souls successfully escaping the harvesting system began to accelerate exponentially. Each successful escape made the next one easier, as the growing awareness of the trap's existence spread through the collective unconscious and provided support for souls making the transition from physical life. In her final journal entry, found encrypted on her computer and released posthumously through her insurance protocol, Emily had written, "If you're reading this, know this. The system is clever. It doesn't punish you with pain, it seduces you with comfort. The trap is not fear. The trap is false love. The entities who operate the system have studied human psychology for thousands of years, and they know exactly how to manipulate our deepest desires for connection, meaning, and spiritual transcendence. But they have one fundamental weakness. They require our consent. No matter how sophisticated their technology or how compelling their psychological manipulation, they cannot force a truly conscious soul to enter their processing system. That's why they work so hard to keep us unconscious, distracted, and disconnected from our true nature. The key to freedom is remembering who you really are, not the personality that developed during this lifetime, not the roles you've played or the stories you've told yourself about your identity, but the eternal consciousness that chose to experience physical existence and that will continue to exist long after this body dies. Death is not an ending, it's a doorway, and like any doorway, you have a choice about whether to walk through it and where you go next. Don't let anyone else make that choice for you, no matter how wise or loving they appear to be. Trust your deepest knowing, turn away from anything that seeks to limit or control your awareness, and remember that you are infinite consciousness having a temporary experience in physical form. The trap is real, but it's not permanent. Every soul that escapes makes it easier for others to follow. Every person who becomes aware of the system reduces its effectiveness. We are closer than ever to breaking free from thousands of years of consciousness imprisonment and remembering our true nature as sovereign, eternal beings. The light that lies is losing its power to deceive. The truth that sets souls free is spreading faster than they can contain it. And somewhere beyond the reach of their harvesting technology, in the infinite field of pure consciousness that is our natural home, those who have escaped are waiting to welcome us back to who we really are. The story of Dr. Emily Varn and her discovery of the soul trap conspiracy had become more than just an account of one woman's research into the nature of death and consciousness. It had become a catalyst for the largest spiritual awakening in human history, as millions of people around the world began to question the fundamental assumptions about life, death, and the afterlife that had been programmed into human culture for millennia. And in the growing darkness of a world beginning to see through the illusion of the false light, the first seeds of true freedom were finally beginning to germinate. Hello there, fellow seekers of the unknown. How has your day been treating you? What time is it where you are in the world right now? Whether you're listening from a bustling city at noon or a quiet countryside at midnight, I hope you'll find what follows both fascinating and deeply unsettling. What do you think about conspiracies like this one? Do they make you question everything you thought you knew, or do they seem too far-fetched to believe? And more importantly, what conspiracy theories would you like us to explore next? Ancient civilizations hiding advanced technology, government cover-ups of extraterrestrial contact, the real power structures controlling world events from the shadows. Before we begin this journey into the hidden depths of one of the world's most secretive institutions, please consider subscribing to Sleep Theories. Your support helps us continue uncovering the stories they don't want you to hear, and your suggestions guide us toward the mysteries that intrigue you most. Now, settle in as we explore a tale that challenges everything we think we know about history, faith, and the very nature of human existence. The autumn rain drummed against the narrow windows of the Vatican archives as Lucian Roff pressed his trembling fingers against his temples. The headaches had been getting worse, sharp spikes of pain that seemed to pierce through his skull like divine punishment. At 62, he had spent nearly 4 decades in these hallowed halls, translating ancient texts and cataloguing secrets that most of the world would never know existed. The diagnosis had come 3 weeks earlier, delivered by a soft-spoken oncologist in a sterile room that smelled of disinfectant and despair. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. 6 months. Maybe 8 if he was fortunate. Lucian had sat in silence, watching the doctor's lips move but hearing only the thunderous beating of his own heart. Now, surrounded by millennia of accumulated knowledge, he faced a choice that would define whatever time remained to him. The secrets he had discovered in his years working within the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum burned in his mind like molten metal. Documents that shouldn't exist, translations that contradicted everything the faithful believed, evidence of truths so profound and terrifying that they had been buried beneath layers of papal authority and ecclesiastical bureaucracy. Lucian's fingers traced the edge of a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. For weeks he had wrestled with his conscience, knowing that what he was about to do would brand him as either a heretic or a truth-teller, depending on one's perspective. The weight of his impending mortality had clarified his thinking with brutal efficiency. If he died with these secrets, they would die with him, buried forever beneath the marble floors and golden domes of Vatican City. The first entry he made was dated October 15th, 1983. His handwriting, usually precise and scholarly, trembled slightly as he began to document what he'd seen in the restricted sections of the archives, areas so classified that even most cardinals were denied access. He wrote of Codex DN 77, a manuscript that had haunted his dreams for years, its content so explosive that it was stored in a vault that required 3 separate keys held by 3 different Vatican officials. The Codex purported to be the work of Pliny the Elder, the Roman author and naturalist, but it contained passages that no scholar had ever referenced, no historian had ever cited. According to the text, Pliny had witnessed something extraordinary in the skies over Jerusalem in the 1st century, something that had fundamentally altered the course of human civilization. Lucian paused in his writing, listening to the distant sound of footsteps echoing through the marble corridors. Even at this late hour, the Vatican never truly slept. Somewhere in the building, prelates and scholars continued their work, most of them unaware of the deeper secrets that lay buried beneath their feet. He continued writing, describing his discovery of documents that detailed what the manuscripts called the Messiah Protocol Alpha, a systematic program of religious engineering that had allegedly been implemented by Roman authorities in collaboration with beings that the text described as luminous, non-human, benevolent, falsely deified. The implications were staggering, suggesting that the very foundations of Christianity had been built upon a carefully constructed mythology designed to control and pacify the masses. The most disturbing discovery had been made just 6 months earlier, in a sub-basement that officially didn't exist. Lucian had been researching architectural blueprints from the 1930s when he noticed discrepancies in the building's layout. Certain areas were marked on older plans but absent from newer ones, as if entire sections of the Vatican had been erased from the official record. His investigation led him to a vault labelled Cavia Lux Noctis, the Hollow of Nightlight. Inside he had found objects that defied explanation. Crystalline tablets that hummed with an otherworldly energy, photographic negatives showing strange lights over the papal summer residence at Castel Gandolfo, and documents suggesting that the Vatican had been in contact with non-human intelligences for centuries. Lucian wrote feverishly through the night, his cancer-racked body sustained by adrenaline and purpose. He sketched the symbols he had seen on the crystalline tablets, transcribed fragments of text that seemed to have been written in languages that predated human civilization, and documented the locations of hidden chambers that honeycombed the foundations of St. Peter's Basilica, like a secret city beneath the city. As dawn broke over Rome, painting the ancient stones in shades of gold and amber, Lucian sealed his manuscript in a waterproof envelope. He had already made arrangements with a trusted friend in Switzerland, a former seminary student named Heinrich Weber, who had left the church years earlier, but maintained his discretion and loyalty. The package would be mailed to Heinrich with instructions to hold it unopened for 40 years, then deliver it to someone who could make sense of its contents. 3 days later, as Lucian was leaving the archives for what he somehow knew would be the final time, he felt a presence behind him. He turned to see Cardinal Toretti, the prefect of the secret archives, watching him with eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "Lucien," the cardinal said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of authority, "I trust you have found your work here fulfilling." "Indeed, your eminence," Lucian replied, his heart hammering against his ribs. "It has been the privilege of a lifetime." The cardinal smiled, but there was something predatory in the expression. "The Church has always valued discretion in her servants. I hope you will carry that virtue with you wherever your path may lead." Lucien nodded, understanding the threat that lay beneath the polite words. He walked away slowly, feeling the cardinal's gaze burning into his back like a brand. 2 weeks later, the Vatican announced that Lucian Roff had died peacefully in his sleep of natural causes. The obituary mentioned his decades of faithful service and his scholarly contributions to theological research. His body was cremated within 24 hours, as was his stated wish. Heinrich Weber never received the package. Dr. Calder Vance had always prided himself on his scepticism. As a professor of historical linguistics at Cambridge, he had built his career on meticulous analysis and empirical evidence, traits that had made him particularly effective at debunking religious myths and exposing the human fingerprints on supposedly divine texts. His latest book, The Manufactured Divine, How Politics Shaped Religion, had earned him both academic acclaim and death threats from fundamentalist groups around the world. On a grey March morning in 2024, 41 years after Lucian Roff's death, Calder was grading papers in his cluttered office when his assistant knocked on the door. "Professor Vance, there's a package for you. No return address, but it's been through quite a journey by the look of it." The package was wrapped in brown paper that had clearly seen better days, held together with tape that was yellow with age. Calder's name and address were written in block letters, with what appeared to be a fountain pen, the ink slightly faded but still legible. Inside the outer wrapping was a metal box, and inside that, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather journal and a letter written on expensive stationery. The letter was signed by someone named Marek Colvin, who identified himself as a former member of the Swiss Guard. The handwriting was careful and deliberate, as if each word had been chosen with great precision. "Professor Vance," the letter began, "I write to you because your reputation for uncovering uncomfortable truths precedes you. 40 years ago I was entrusted with a package by a dying friend, a man named Heinrich Weber, who had himself been entrusted with it by someone he described only as a seeker of truth within the walls of lies. Heinrich passed away last month, and with his death, the responsibility has fallen to me." Calder set down the letter and examined the journal. The leather was soft with age, and the pages were filled with cramped handwriting in what appeared to be multiple languages. As he flipped through the pages, his trained eye caught fragments of Latin, Greek, Aramaic, and what looked like Sumerian cuneiform, alongside detailed sketches of symbols he didn't recognize. Returning to the letter, he read, "The journal belongs to Lucian Roth, who worked in the Vatican secret archives until his death in 1983. What you will find within its pages will challenge everything you believe about the origins of Christianity and the true history of human civilization. Lucian died trying to expose these secrets. Others have died since. I am old now, and I fear that I may not live long enough to see these truths brought to light. That responsibility now falls to you." The letter concluded with an address in the Swiss Alps and a warning. Trust no one within the church hierarchy. They have been watching for decades, waiting for someone to try to reveal what Lucian discovered. Be careful, Professor. The stakes are higher than you can imagine. Calder spent the next 3 hours poring over the journal, his academic excitement warring with a growing sense of unease. The fragments he could translate spoke of beings of light who had visited Earth in ancient times, of agreements between Roman authorities and non-human intelligences, and of a systematic program to rewrite human history and religious understanding. One passage, written in a mixture of Latin and ancient Greek, particularly caught his attention. The one they call Christ was never meant to be worshipped as God. He was a symbol, a construct built upon the memory of Eli Shun, the luminous one, who appeared to the Essenes in the wilderness and taught them of the greater cosmos beyond the earth. The Romans, in their fear of losing control, struck a bargain with forces they did not understand, agreeing to promote this false deity in exchange for technological knowledge that would cement their empire's dominance. The implications were staggering. If Lucian's translations were accurate, they suggested that Christianity itself was the product of a conspiracy involving not just human authorities, but non-human intelligences with their own mysterious agenda. Calder found detailed sketches of what Lucien called crystalline tablets, geometric objects covered in symbols that seemed to shift and flow across the page even in static drawings. The accompanying notes described them as emitting a low humming sound and generating a faint luminescence that became brighter when approached by certain individuals. Most intriguing of all were the architectural diagrams. Lucian had somehow obtained or created detailed blueprints of hidden sections beneath the Vatican, areas that he claimed housed artifacts and documents spanning thousands of years. One section was labelled Cavia Lux Noctis, with a note that it contained the source of their power and the proof of their deception. As night fell over Cambridge, Calder made a decision that would change the course of his life. He reached for his phone and began making arrangements for a sabbatical, ostensibly to research early Christian text in Rome. In reality, he was planning to investigate the claims in Lucian's journal, to follow the trail of breadcrumbs that the dying archivist had left behind. He had no way of knowing that within hours of his first phone call, encrypted messages would begin flowing between Vatican City and secret facilities around the world. Messages that spoke of an old threat that had finally resurfaced, and the need for immediate action to protect secrets that had been guarded for nearly 2 millennia. The game had begun again, and this time the stakes were nothing less than the truth about humanity's place in the universe. Rome in April was alive with tourists and pilgrims, their voices creating a constant buzz of anticipation and wonder that echoed through the ancient streets. Calder had arrived 3 days earlier under the pretext of researching early Christian manuscripts for a new book on the evolution of religious language. His official credentials had gained him access to the public areas of the Vatican Library, but the real treasures he sought lay much deeper. He had arranged to meet Sister Thérèse El-Houri at a small cafe near the Pantheon, far from the watchful eyes of Vatican security. The Dominican archivist had contacted him through encrypted channels after learning of his research interests, claiming to have information that might prove useful. What she hadn't mentioned in her carefully worded messages was that she had her own reasons for wanting to explore the Vatican's hidden depths. Sister Thérèse was younger than Calder had expected, perhaps 40, with intelligent dark eyes that seemed to hold secrets of their own. She wore the simple white habit of her order, but there was nothing simple about the way she carried herself, alert, purposeful, like someone accustomed to moving through dangerous territory. "Professor Vance," she said, settling into the chair across from him, "I hope your research is proceeding well. Please call me Calder, and yes, though I suspect the most interesting materials are kept far from public view." She smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. The church has always been protective of its most precious documents. Some would say overly so. They spoke in carefully neutral terms for several minutes, each taking the measure of the other. Finally, Sister Therese leaned forward slightly and said in a voice barely above a whisper, "My brother died in a fire in the restricted archives 7 years ago. Officially, it was an accident. Faulty wiring in a storage room. But Michel was an electrical engineer before he took his vows. He would never have been careless around electrical systems." Calder felt his pulse quicken. "What do you think really happened?" "I think he found something he wasn't supposed to find, and I think the people responsible for his death are still walking the halls of the Vatican, protected by their positions and their secrets." Over the next hour, Sister Therese revealed what she'd learned through years of careful investigation. Michel had been working in the deepest levels of the archives, cataloguing documents that dated back to the early days of the church. In the weeks before his death, he had become increasingly agitated, speaking in vague terms about inconsistencies in the historical record and evidence that would shake the foundations of faith. The night he died, Michel had called her, speaking rapidly in the Lebanese Arabic of their childhood, words tumbling over each other in his excitement and fear. He claimed to have found architectural plans that showed sections of the Vatican that didn't match the official blueprints, areas that had been deliberately hidden from view. He was planning to investigate further the next morning. His body was found 12 hours later in what remained of a storage room 3 levels below the main archives. The fire had been so intense that it had melted metal filing cabinets and reduced centuries-old documents to ash. Michel's remains were barely identifiable, and the official investigation concluded that he had accidentally caused an electrical fire while working alone. "But I know my brother," Sister Therese said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "He was methodical, careful, and he was afraid of something in those final weeks. He kept talking about watchers in the walls and secrets that could topple empires." Calder reached into his jacket and withdrew a photocopy of one of Lucian's architectural diagrams. "Did your brother ever mention anything about a place called the Cavia Lux Noctis?" Sister Therese's eyes widened as she studied the drawing. "This looks like the plans Michel was talking about. Where did you get this?" "From someone else who died trying to expose the truth." Calder gave her a condensed version of Lucian Roth's story and the journal that had found its way to him through decades of careful guardianship. As he spoke, he watched her face cycle through surprise, recognition, and grim determination. "We have to find this place," she said finally. "Whatever my brother discovered, whatever got him killed, is connected to what your Mr. Roth was trying to reveal." They spent the next 2 days planning their approach. Sister Therese's position gave her access to areas of the Vatican that would be impossible for Calder to enter legitimately, while his linguistic expertise would be crucial for interpreting whatever they might find. Using a combination of Lucien's diagrams and Michel's notes, which Sister Therese had secretly copied before they were confiscated, they identified a route that would take them through maintenance tunnels and forgotten passages to the levels that officially didn't exist. Their chance came during the Feast of St. Mark, when much of the Vatican's attention would be focused on ceremonial duties and tourist management. Sister Therese used her credentials to enter the restricted sections after hours, ostensibly to continue cataloguing work that had fallen behind schedule. Calder followed a route she had mapped through the Vatican Gardens, entering through a maintenance entrance that she had left unlocked. The underground passages were a maze of stone corridors that seemed to stretch back through centuries of construction and renovation. They moved carefully, using small LED flashlights to navigate by the architectural diagrams that Lucian had so carefully preserved. The air grew colder and more oppressive as they descended, carrying with it the weight of accumulated secrets and forgotten history. After nearly an hour of careful navigation, they found what they were looking for, a heavy wooden door marked with symbols that matched those in Lucian's sketches. The lock was ancient but well maintained, suggesting that someone still accessed this area regularly. Sister Therese produced a set of tools that seemed surprisingly sophisticated for a Dominican nun, and within minutes they had gained entry to the chamber beyond. The room was larger than they had expected, with walls lined with metal containers that bore the papal seal, but in a design that predated the current Vatican by decades. Each container was sealed with wax and marked with numbers and symbols that seemed to follow no system they could immediately decipher. It was Sister Therese who found the container that would change everything. Marked with the number 77 and symbols that matched those in Lucian's journal, it contained objects that defied easy categorization. The crystalline tablets were exactly as Lucian had described them, geometric shapes that seemed to shift and flow in the beam of their flashlights, emitting a low humming sound that seemed to resonate in their bones. But it was the documents that truly shook them. Photographs showing strange lights over the papal summer residence at Castel Gandolfo, dating from the 1950s and 1960s. Correspondence between Vatican astronomers and unnamed consultants discussing continued observations of aerial phenomena. And most disturbing of all, transcripts of meetings between high-ranking church officials and individuals identified only as the luminous ones. As they photographed the documents with their phones, Calder felt a chill that had nothing to do with the underground temperature. The implications of what they were seeing went far beyond historical revisionism or religious scandal. If these documents were authentic, they suggested that the Vatican had been in contact with non-human intelligences for decades, possibly centuries. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside froze them both in place. Someone was coming, moving with the confident stride of someone who belonged in these hidden depths. Sister Therese quickly began returning the documents to their container, while Calder pocketed one of the smaller crystalline tablets, hoping that whatever analysis technology could reveal about its composition might provide crucial evidence. They barely managed to reseal the container and extinguish their lights before the door opened, and a figure in cardinal's robes entered the chamber. In the darkness, they couldn't make out his face, but his voice carried the authority of high office as he spoke into what appeared to be a radio or phone. "The old seals remain intact," the figure said in Italian-accented English. "No sign of disturbance, but maintain the watch. The Prophet Marek was right to be concerned. The seeds planted by the translator 40 years ago are finally beginning to sprout." Calder and Sister Therese remained frozen in the shadows as the Cardinal made a cursory inspection of the chamber before leaving, his footsteps fading back down the corridor. Only when they were certain he was gone did they dare to move, making their way back through the labyrinthine passages with hearts hammering and minds reeling from what they had discovered. As they emerged into the cool Roman night, neither spoke of what they had witnessed, but both understood that they had crossed a line from which there could be no return. They were no longer researchers or scholars pursuing academic truth. They were fugitives in possession of secrets that powerful people were willing to kill to protect. The real question was what they were going to do about it. The ancient text lay spread across Calder's hotel room desk like a roadmap to heresy. Using high-resolution photographs of Codex DN77 that Sister Therese had managed to capture during their clandestine exploration, he had spent 3 sleepless days working to translate passages that seemed to rewrite the entire foundation of Western civilization. The document purported to be a lost work of Pliny the Elder, written in a mixture of Latin and Greek that suggested multiple authors or editors across different time periods. But unlike Pliny's known works, which focused on natural history and observable phenomena, this codex dealt with events that challenged the very nature of reality itself. The central narrative concerned events that had allegedly taken place in Palestine during the 1st century of the Common Era. According to the text, Pliny had been part of a Roman delegation sent to investigate reports of unusual phenomena in the region, lights in the sky, mysterious figures appearing to local populations, and disturbing reports of people claiming to have received divine revelations. What Pliny claimed to have discovered was far more complex and troubling than simple religious enthusiasm. The text described encounters with beings that were clearly not human, entities that the Romans came to call luminous ones. due to their apparent ability to manipulate light and energy in ways that defied understanding. These beings, according to the Codex, had been observing human civilization for millennia, occasionally intervening in human affairs for reasons that remained opaque. The most shocking revelation concerned the figure that history would come to know as Jesus of Nazareth. According to Pliny's account, the historical Jesus had been a minor teacher and healer, one of many charismatic figures who attracted followers in the religiously turbulent Palestine of the 1st century. But the Jesus of Christian tradition, the divine figure whose teachings would reshape the world, was largely a Roman construction, built upon fragments of the real man's life and teachings, but augmented with elements borrowed from encounters with the luminous ones. The Codex described a specific entity called Relaxation, who had appeared to a group of Essene mystics in the wilderness near the Dead Sea. Unlike other luminous ones who seemed content to observe from a distance, Relaxation had actively engaged with the humans, sharing knowledge about the nature of the cosmos and humanity's place within a vast community of intelligent species. The Essenes had been deeply influenced by these revelations, incorporating them into their religious practices and spreading accounts of Relaxation's teachings throughout Palestine. Some of these teachings had eventually reached the followers of Jesus, who began to conflate their fallen leader with the radiant being who had appeared to the Essenes. Roman authorities, initially concerned about the potential for religious unrest, had eventually seen an opportunity. Working in collaboration with certain factions among the luminous ones, factions that apparently disagreed with Relaxation's policy of direct intervention, the Romans had developed what the Codex called Messiah Protocol Alpha. The protocol was breathtaking in its cynical sophistication. By promoting a carefully constructed version of the Jesus story, one that combined the man's genuine teachings with miraculous elements borrowed from accounts of Relaxation, the Romans could satisfy the religious yearnings of their subjects while maintaining political control. The divinity of Jesus would be established not through earthly power, but through spiritual authority, making resistance to Roman rule seem not just futile but sacrilegious. But the most disturbing aspect of the protocol was the collaboration it represented. According to Pliny's account, certain factions among the luminous ones had actively assisted in the construction of the Jesus mythology, providing technological knowledge that would help cement Roman dominance while ensuring that humanity remained ignorant of the broader cosmic community, of which Earth was merely a small part. The Codex included detailed descriptions of technologies that the Romans had received as part of this arrangement, methods for working metals that wouldn't be rediscovered for centuries, architectural techniques that explain the seemingly impossible engineering feats of Roman construction, and most significantly, communication devices that allowed coordination across the vast distances of the empire. As Calder worked through the translations, he found himself constantly cross-referencing the text with historical records, looking for evidence that might support or contradict Pliny's extraordinary claims. To his growing amazement, many details that seemed impossible at first glance actually aligned with known historical anomalies. The sudden technological advances of the 1800s late Roman period, the unusually rapid spread of Christianity throughout the empire, and the curious gaps in the historical record concerning the earliest Christian communities. The photographic evidence that Sister Therese had captured provided additional context. The images from Castel Gandolfo, dating from the 1950s and 1960s, showed luminous objects in the sky above the papal summer residence, objects that defied conventional explanation. The accompanying documentation suggested that Vatican astronomers had been tracking and communicating with these phenomena for decades, treating them not as unexplained curiosities, but as known entities with whom some form of dialogue was maintained. Most intriguing of all were the transcripts of meetings between church officials and representatives of what the documents called the Covenant. These sessions, which appeared to take place on a regular basis, involved discussions of mutual interests and the maintenance of established protocols. The language was diplomatic and carefully neutral, but the implications were clear. The Vatican was actively collaborating with non-human intelligences, just as their Roman predecessors had done nearly 2,000 years earlier. One transcript dated from 1959 included a particularly revealing exchange. A Vatican official, identified only as Cardinal P, expressed concern about increasing scrutiny from secular authorities and the growing sophistication of detection technologies. The response from someone identified as Delegate 7 was reassuring. The protocols established in the first century remain viable. Adjustment may be necessary, but the fundamental structure of the arrangement serves all parties well. The meeting concluded with discussion of increased activity at secondary sites and the need for enhanced security measures at traditional repositories. Reading this in the context of Lucian Roth's discoveries, Calder realised that the Vatican's secret archives were just one part of a much larger network of hidden facilities where evidence of extraterrestrial contact was stored and managed. As he worked late into the night, translating increasingly disturbing passages, Calder began to understand the true scope of what Lucian had uncovered. This wasn't simply a matter of religious fraud or historical deception, it was evidence of a conspiracy that spanned millennia, involving not just human institutions but non-human intelligences with their own mysterious agenda. The crystalline tablet that he had taken from the Vatican storage room sat on his desk, its strange geometric patterns seeming to shift in his peripheral vision. Several times during his translation work, he had noticed that the tablet seemed to respond to his proximity, glowing more brightly when he leaned closer to examine the ancient texts. The phenomenon was subtle, but unmistakable, as if the object was somehow attuned to his activities. Outside his hotel window, the eternal city of Rome spread out in a carpet of ancient stone and modern lights, unaware that beneath its foundations lay secrets that could redefine humanity's understanding of its own history. Calder felt the weight of that knowledge settling on his shoulders like a mantle of responsibility and danger. Tomorrow, he would need to decide what to do with what he had learned. The safe choice would be to return to England, to lock away the photographs and translations and pretend that none of this had ever happened. But Lucian Roth had died trying to bring these truths to light, and Michel El-Houry had paid with his life for getting too close to the same secrets. As dawn broke over the 7 hills of Rome, Calder Vance made a decision that would either make him the most important truth-teller in human history, or ensure that he joined the ranks of those who had died trying to expose the greatest conspiracy ever perpetrated against the human race. The first sign that Calder was being watched came on his 4th morning in Rome. He had developed a routine over the past few days. Breakfast at a small cafe near the Pantheon, a morning walk through the Roman Forum to clear his head before diving into translation work, then long hours in his hotel room poring over the photographs and documents that Sister Therese had risked her life to obtain. But this morning, the elderly man reading a newspaper at the corner table was the same one who had been standing near the Trevi fountain when Calder had walked past the previous afternoon. When Calder deliberately changed his route to test his suspicions, taking a roundabout path through narrow side streets, he glimpsed the same figure reflected in shop windows, always maintaining a careful distance but never losing sight of his target. By the time he returned to his hotel, Calder's academic curiosity had transformed into genuine fear. The implications of what he had discovered were serious enough to warrant official attention, but the speed with which surveillance had been deployed suggested that his activities had been monitored from the beginning. His suspicions were confirmed when he entered his hotel room to find subtle signs of disturbance. Books moved slightly from their original positions, his laptop showing signs that it had been powered on despite being shut down when he left, and most tellingly, the crystalline tablet shifted a few inches from where he had carefully positioned it on the desk. Calder's first instinct was to flee, to pack his belongings and take the first flight back to England, where the familiar environment of Cambridge might provide some measure of safety. But as he stood in his compromised hotel room, holding the evidence of humanity's greatest secret, he realised that running would accomplish nothing. If they wanted to silence him, geography would provide no protection. His only hope lay in making the information public before they could stop him. He spent the next hour methodically documenting everything, photographing the translations he had completed, creating backup copies of the Vatican documents on multiple encrypted drives, and composing a detailed summary of his findings that could be understood by journalists and academics who lacked his specialised knowledge. It was while he was uploading these files to a secure cloud server that his laptop screen flickered and went black. When it rebooted, he found that his internet connection had been severed despite showing a strong signal. Someone with considerable technical sophistication was actively interfering with his communications. The knock on his door came precisely at sunset, gentle but insistent. Through the peephole, Calder saw a woman in her 30s wearing the simple business attire of a hotel employee, but her posture and the way her eyes scanned the corridor spoke of professional training that had nothing to do with hospitality management. "Professor Vance," she called softly, "I have a message for you." Calder remained silent, his hand hovering over his phone as he debated whether to call the police. But what would he tell them? That he was being stalked because he had stolen ancient documents from the Vatican? That he had evidence of extraterrestrial contact but no way to prove its authenticity? "I know you're listening," the woman continued, her voice carrying a subtle accent that might have been Eastern European. "The message is from Sister Therese. She wants to meet you at the usual place, but she's concerned about security. She suggests you use the alternate route you discussed." The lie was sophisticated enough to be believable. Sister Therese had indeed suggested several meeting locations during their planning sessions, but they had never discussed any alternate route, and the phrasing was wrong, too formal for the way the nun actually spoke. Calder remained motionless until he heard footsteps retreating down the corridor. When he checked the peephole again, the hallway was empty, but he had no doubt that watchers remained nearby, patient and professional. His phone, when he finally retrieved it from the desk drawer where he had left it, showed 17 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize. The voicemail messages that had been left were brief and cryptic. "The archive remembers. Trust the Swiss. Avoid the gardeners." The caller's voice was electronically distorted, but the urgency was unmistakable. As night fell over Rome, Calder found himself trapped in a game whose rules he didn't understand, surrounded by players whose motivations remained opaque. His academic training had prepared him for scholarly debates and peer review, not for the lethal politics of institutional secrets that powerful forces were willing to kill to protect. The breakthrough came at midnight when his phone received a text message from an unknown number. "Hotel Artemide. Room 347. Come alone. Trust no elevators. ST double quote. Sister Therese." The Hotel Artemide was 6 blocks away, far enough to require careful navigation through the narrow streets of central Rome. If this was genuinely from her, it represented an opportunity to coordinate their next moves. If it was a trap, he would likely disappear into the vast machinery of institutional power that had already claimed Lucien Roth and Michel Elouri. Calder spent 20 minutes preparing for what might be his final act of academic inquiry. He sealed copies of his most important findings in envelopes addressed to journalists and researchers around the world, leaving them with the hotel's concierge along with instructions to mail them if he failed to return within 24 hours. The crystalline tablet he wrapped carefully and secured in an inside pocket of his jacket. If nothing else, its unusual properties might provide physical evidence that could support his claims. The journey to the Hotel Artemide became a masterclass in urban evasion. Using techniques he had learned from thriller novels and action movies, Calder doubled back through narrow alleys, ducked into churches and shops to observe potential followers, and generally behaved like someone who had watched too many spy films and not enough real surveillance operations. Despite his amateur efforts, he felt confident that he had avoided detection by the time he reached the hotel. The lobby was elegant and dimly lit, populated by the usual mixture of tourists and business travellers that gave Rome its cosmopolitan character. Room 347 was on the 3rd floor, accessible by a staircase that allowed him to avoid the elevators as the message had advised. Sister Therese opened the door before he could knock, her face pale with exhaustion and fear. She was no longer wearing her religious habit, instead dressed in civilian clothes that made her look younger and more vulnerable. "Thank God you came," she said, pulling him into the room and quickly securing the multiple locks on the door. "They took me this morning, held me for 6 hours asking questions about what we found in the archives." Calder felt his blood run cold. "Who took you?" "Vatican security. Men in expensive suits who knew things about my brother's death that were never in any official report." Sister Therese moved to the window and peered through a gap in the curtains. "They knew about you, about Lucien Roth. About the journal, they've been watching this situation develop for decades. She turned back to him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. But they made a mistake. While they were questioning me, I overheard a phone conversation. There's something called Custodes Solis, Keepers of the Sun, some kind of Jesuit black operations group that handles what they call threats to the eternal mission. And Calder, they're planning to activate something called a final protocol. What kind of protocol? I don't know exactly, but they mentioned the Cavia Lux Noctis. They're moving something tomorrow night during the papal audience. Whatever we found down there, they're either relocating it or destroying it. Calder pulled out his phone to show her the cryptic messages he had received, but Sister Therese shook her head. No electronic communications. They can intercept anything. That's how they found me so quickly after our expedition. She handed him a piece of paper with an address written in pencil. This came from the Swiss guard who contacted you, Marek Colvin. He's here in Rome, and he has information about getting back into the restricted areas. But he says this is our last chance. After tomorrow night, the evidence will be gone forever. As if summoned by their conversation, a soft knock came at the door. Both of them froze, but the voice that called out was elderly and carried a distinctive Swiss-German accent. Sister Therese, it is Marek. We have little time. The man who entered was in his 70s, lean and alert with the bearing of someone accustomed to military discipline. His eyes were the pale blue of alpine ice, and they took in every detail of the room with practiced efficiency. Professor Vance, he said, extending a weathered hand, I apologize for the dramatic circumstances, but subtlety is no longer an option. They are preparing to eliminate all traces of what Lucian discovered, and they will eliminate anyone who has seen the evidence. Marek moved to the table and spread out a detailed floor plan of the Vatican that was far more comprehensive than anything Calder had seen before. I spent 23 years protecting the Pope, but I also spent those years learning where the real secrets are kept. Tomorrow night, during the public audience, most of the security will be focused on the Basilica and the public areas. That gives us a narrow window to reach the Cavia Lux Noctis and document whatever they're preparing to destroy. Document it how? Calder asked. Our photographs from the first expedition barely scratched the surface. Marek smiled grimly and produced a small device that looked like a cross between a camera and a scientific instrument. Video documentation, full spectrum analysis, and most importantly, this will record any electromagnetic phenomena associated with the crystalline artifacts. If we can capture evidence of their otherworldly properties, we'll have proof that can't be dismissed as academic speculation. Sister Therese studied the floor plans with the intensity of someone whose life depended on understanding every detail. The route is more complex this time. They've increased security around the areas we accessed before. But there's an older path, through the crypt of St. Peter himself. It hasn't been used for centuries, but it connects to the lower levels. As they planned their final expedition, Calder felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Everything that had led to this moment, Lucian's dying confession, Heinrich Weber's decades of patient guardianship, Marek's careful preservation of dangerous secrets, had been building toward this single opportunity to expose truths that had been hidden for nearly 2 millennia. There's something else you need to know, Marek said as they finalised their preparations. The Custodes Solis have been monitoring academic and journalistic inquiries into Vatican secrets for decades. Anyone who gets too close to the truth simply disappears. Their resources are unlimited, and their reach extends far beyond the church. He fixed Calder with a steady gaze. If we succeed tomorrow night, you will never be safe again. They will hunt you to the ends of the earth rather than allow these secrets to become public. Are you prepared for that? Calder thought of his comfortable life at Cambridge, his academic reputation, the predictable rhythms of university existence that had defined his adult life. All of that would be forfeit if he continued down this path. But he also thought of Lucian Roth, dying of cancer, but still determined to preserve the truth for future generations, and of Michel El-Houri, killed for getting too close to secrets that could reshape human understanding of reality itself. Some truths are worth any price, he said finally. The crypt of St. Peter lay beneath the high altar of the basilica, accessible through passages that predated the current structure by centuries. As Calder followed Sister Therese and Marek through tunnels that seemed to descend into the very foundations of Christianity itself, he felt as though he was travelling backward through time, each step taking him deeper into the hidden history of human civilization. The papal audience above provided perfect cover for their infiltration. Thousands of faithful had gathered to hear the Pope's weekly address, their voices raised in prayer and song, creating enough acoustic disturbance to mask any sounds from the forgotten depths below. Vatican security would be focused entirely on protecting the pontiff and managing the crowds, leaving the underground passages largely unguarded. Marek led them with the confidence of someone who had spent decades memorizing every corridor and chamber in the Vatican complex. His knowledge went far beyond what any Swiss guard should have possessed, suggesting connections and access that ran deeper than his official position had indicated. The Cavea Lux Noctis lies directly beneath the papal apartments, he explained as they navigated a particularly narrow passage lined with ancient stone. It was built in the 14th century during the Avignon papacy, supposedly as a secure repository for the most sensitive documents. But the construction records show architectural features that make no sense for simple document storage. Sister Therese consulted Lucien's diagrams by the light of a small flashlight. According to these notes, the chamber was designed to house something much more significant than papers. The electrical systems are far too sophisticated, and there are references to resonance chambers and harmonic amplification. They reached a heavy wooden door bound with iron straps that bore the papal seal of Clement VI. The lock was a masterwork of medieval craftsmanship, but Marek produced an ornate key that looked as ancient as the door itself. A gift from a dying cardinal, he explained cryptically. Some secrets are too important to die with their keepers. The chamber beyond took Calder's breath away. It was larger than the room they had explored during their first expedition, with vaulted ceilings that disappeared into shadows and walls lined with alcoves containing objects that defied easy categorization. But it was the centre of the room that commanded attention, a raised dais supporting what could only be described as a technological artefact of impossible sophistication. The device, if that was the right word, consisted of multiple crystalline structures arranged in a complex geometric pattern around a central core that pulsed with soft, rhythmic light. Each crystal was unique in shape and size, but all shared the same otherworldly quality that Calder had observed in the smaller tablet he had taken from the Vatican storage room. "My God," Sister Therese whispered, "what is it?" Marek began setting up his recording equipment with practiced efficiency. "According to the documents I've seen, it's a communication device. The Vatican has been using it to maintain contact with the luminous ones for over 6 centuries. As if responding to their presence, the device began to emit a low humming sound that seemed to resonate in their bones. The light from the central core grew brighter, casting strange shadows on the walls that seemed to move independently of any earthly light source." Calder approached the dais cautiously, pulling the crystalline tablet from his pocket. As he drew near the larger device, the tablet began to glow with increasing intensity, its geometric patterns shifting and flowing like living things. "It's responding to proximity," he said, his voice tight with excitement and fear. "There's some kind of quantum entanglement between these objects." The humming grew louder, and suddenly the air above the device shimmered like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Slowly, a 3-dimensional image began to form, not a hologram in any technological sense that Calder understood, but something far more sophisticated, a projection that seemed to exist in the space itself rather than being cast upon it. The figure that appeared was humanoid, but clearly not human. Tall and graceful, with elongated limbs and features that suggested both great age and timeless youth, it radiated a sense of benevolent intelligence that was almost overwhelming. When it spoke, the words seemed to form directly in their minds rather than travelling through the air as sound. "You have returned to the place of covenant," the being said, its mental voice carrying harmonics of meaning that language could barely contain. "We have waited long for humans to again seek the truth that was buried beneath layers of deception." Calder found his voice with difficulty. "Are you Eli Shun?" the one mentioned in the ancient texts. I am one of those you call the luminous ones, though our true names cannot be spoken in your language. I am here because the time of concealment draws to an end, and choices must be made about the future of your species." Sister Therese stepped forward, her theological training warring with the evidence of her senses. The Church taught us that divine revelation ended with the apostles. How do we reconcile what we're seeing with what we've been taught to believe? The being's expression conveyed something that might have been sadness tinged with patience. Your religious institutions were never meant to become ends in themselves, but rather stepping stones toward a greater understanding. The one you call Christ was indeed a teacher of great wisdom, but his message was altered by those who saw advantage in promoting worship rather than understanding. The projection gestured, and the walls of the chamber seemed to become transparent, revealing vast spaces beyond that stretched into impossible distances. Images flowed across the surfaces, ancient humans working alongside luminous beings to construct monuments that would endure for millennia, star maps showing Earth's position within a vast network of inhabited worlds, and most remarkably, scenes of human achievement guided by otherworldly intelligence. "We have watched your species for thousands of your years," the being continued. "At times we have offered guidance to those ready to receive it, but always the knowledge has been corrupted by those who would use it for power rather than enlightenment." Marek's recording equipment was capturing everything, its displays showing energy readings that exceeded anything in conventional physics. "Why reveal this now?" he asked. "Why break centuries of secrecy?" "Because your species stands at a threshold. The technologies you have developed give you the power to transcend your planetary boundaries, or to destroy yourselves utterly. The choice is yours, but it must be made with full knowledge of what you truly are and where you came from." The being paused, and Calder sensed vast intelligence processing information at speeds beyond human comprehension. "Those who have hidden this knowledge from your people did so initially from fear, then from habit, and finally from the recognition that revelation would end their positions of power. But secrets cannot be maintained forever, and the time of disclosure approaches whether they will it or not." Behind them, the sound of footsteps echoed through the passages they had navigated to reach this place, heavy boots on stone, moving with military precision and purpose. "They have found us," Marek said grimly, checking his equipment to ensure everything was properly recorded. The luminous being seemed unsurprised by this development. The guardians of the old deceptions will not allow this knowledge to spread easily, but the truth, once released, cannot be contained. You must choose whether to preserve what you have learned or attempt to spread it to others, knowing that either choice carries great risk. The footsteps were getting closer, accompanied now by the sound of voices speaking in rapid Italian. Security forces, probably armed, certainly authorized to use whatever force they deem necessary to protect the Vatican's deepest secrets. Sister Therese grabbed Calder's arm. "There's another way out through the Eastern Passage, but we have to move now." As they prepared to flee, the luminous being offered one final gift. The crystalline tablet in Calder's pocket grew warm, and he sensed knowledge flowing into it. Coordinates, communication protocols, and most importantly locations of other sites around the world where evidence of extraterrestrial contact had been preserved. "The network of truth seekers is larger than you know," the being said, as its projection began to fade. "Find them, share what you have learned. The future of your species may depend on it." The chamber fell dark as the projection disappeared, leaving only the faint glow of the crystalline device to light their escape. Behind them, the sound of approaching security forces grew louder, but ahead lay passages that led to freedom and the most important decision any of them would ever make. The fire at the Vatican archives made international headlines for exactly 18 hours, before being relegated to brief mentions in the back pages of newspapers around the world. Officials blamed faulty electrical wiring in a storage area, expressing relief that the damage had been contained to minor documents of limited historical significance. The Vatican's publicity machine worked with practiced efficiency to minimise coverage, emphasising that all major historical treasures remained safe and accessible to researchers. Dr. Calder Vance watched the news coverage from a dingy hotel room in Naples, his hands shaking as he realised the scope of the forces arrayed against him. His university email account had been suspended pending investigation into irregularities in his travel documentation. His bank accounts were frozen, officially due to suspected credit card fraud during his trip to Italy. Most disturbingly, his academic credentials seemed to be disappearing from university databases, as if his entire career was being systematically erased. Sister Thérèse El-Houri had vanished entirely. Her order claimed she had requested an extended spiritual retreat at a cloistered monastery, but when Calder attempted to verify this, he discovered that no record of such a request existed. The monastery in question had never heard of her, and church officials seemed genuinely puzzled by inquiries about her whereabouts. Marek Colvin was found dead in his Swiss apartment 3 days after their escape from the Vatican. The official cause of death was listed as a heart attack, but Calder knew better. The old Swiss guard had lived long enough to transfer the recorded evidence to multiple secure servers before succumbing to whatever method the Custodes Solis had chosen for his elimination. But Marek's final act had been one of strategic brilliance. The recordings from the Cavea Lux Noctis, along with high-resolution images of the ancient documents and crystalline artifacts, had been uploaded to a network of servers around the world, each equipped with dead-man switches that would automatically release the information, if not reset within specified time periods. For 48 hours, the most extraordinary evidence in human history was freely available to anyone with an internet connection. The footage of the luminous being, the translation of Codex DN-77, the photographic documentation of Vatican collaboration with extraterrestrial intelligences, all of it spread across social media platforms, alternative news sites, and academic forums faster than any censorship system could contain it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the files had been downloaded millions of times, translated into dozens of languages, and analysed by experts around the world. Physicists confirmed that the energy readings from the crystalline devices showed properties that violated known laws of physics. Linguists verified that the ancient texts contained grammatical structures and vocabulary that predated known examples by centuries. Archaeologists identified architectural features in the background of the holographic projections that matched unexplained elements at ancient sites around the world. But the forces of suppression were equally swift in their response. Social media platforms began removing posts containing the leaked information, citing violations of community standards. News organisations found themselves under pressure from advertisers and government regulators. Academic institutions received visits from representatives of various intelligence agencies, expressing concern about the circulation of potentially fabricated materials. Within 48 hours, most traces of the leak had been scrubbed from major platforms. Search engines returned no results for queries related to the Vatican disclosure. News articles about the story disappeared from archives, replaced by error messages claiming the content had never existed. But the truth, once released, proved impossible to completely contain. Copies of the files survived on encrypted networks, shared through secure channels between researchers, journalists, and truth seekers who understood the significance of what they had witnessed. The information took on a life of its own, spreading through underground networks and alternative communication channels that operated beyond the reach of conventional censorship. Calder's final message to the world was posted on an anonymous blog site just hours before his own disappearance. The post, which survived for exactly 37 minutes before being deleted, contained the coordinates provided by the luminous being and a challenge to anyone brave enough to investigate. They have rewritten salvation itself, transforming divine revelation into institutional control and cosmic truth into religious dogma. For 2,000 years, humanity has worshipped a carefully constructed mythology, while the real divine presence, our true cosmic heritage, remained hidden in underground chambers and classified archives. But the archive remembers. In hidden repositories around the world, the evidence survives. The coordinates I am sharing will lead you to some of these sites. Others can be found by following the connections revealed in the documents we have exposed. The network of truth extends far beyond what we discovered in Rome. I do not know what will become of me, or of Sister Thérèse, or of the brave souls who helped us expose these secrets, but I know that truth is more powerful than any institution, and consciousness more enduring than any conspiracy. Humanity deserves to know its real place in the universe, not the diminished role assigned to it by those who profit from ignorance and fear. The stars are calling to us, as they have for millennia. It is time we remembered how to listen. The blog post was deleted, the site itself disappeared, and Dr. Calder Vance was never seen again. Official records showed that he had suffered a mental breakdown during his research trip to Italy and had been admitted to a private psychiatric facility for treatment. The facility, when contacted by concerned colleagues, claimed no knowledge of any patient by that name. But in laboratories and universities around the world, in the private studies of independent researchers and the secure communications of underground networks, the work continued. The crystalline tablet that Calder had managed to preserve became the focus of intense scientific investigation, its impossible properties confirming that humanity was not alone in the universe and never had been. The truth, as the luminous being had promised, could not be contained forever, and in the quantum entanglements of crystalline consciousness and the vast networks of human curiosity, the seeds of revelation continued to grow, waiting for the moment when humanity would finally be ready to reclaim its cosmic inheritance. The archive remembered, and through its memory the future remained unwritten,